this feels like a seminar. I might have enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It's lovely.
You've got to get in at that point and be able to give families support they need then to really protect the long-term outcomes for that baby.
That like compassionate, empathic and curious lens rather than that kind of blame, shame.
But we do see that it does make a profound impact for a lot of these families. And
this is the kind of work we try to do with families to increase their understanding of generational patterns and family systems.
And then I think we need this embedded in our systems. So we need our social care teams to have training and support around those early years.
Hello and welcome back to the Social Matters podcast. We are 3 social workers talking about social matters. I'm Fran.
I'm Nadia.
Hi, and I'm Eugene.
We are thrilled to have a special guest in the studio with us today. We have Lauren from For Baby's Sake charity. They are dedicated to breaking the cycle of domestic abuse to give babies the best start in life. What a great charity. And welcome, Lauren.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Woo! Thank you so much for joining us today. So first of all, I guess could you tell us a bit about your kind of journey in the charity sector and what inspired you to kind of do this work, working in the field of domestic abuse and supporting families in crisis?
Oh, I could probably spend half an hour just talking about that, so I'll try and
your
be
full
concise.
CV.
My whole CV. Yeah, especially now I'm getting on a bit, it's getting longer and longer. But I suppose, do you know where it began? I grew up in a mining town. My dad was a Baptist minister up in Scotland during the 80s, during the all of the strikes, the miners' strikes, and I think that shaped probably who I am. We came from a family that were always people in the house. It was very much about service and service of the community, and so I've always sort of had a heart for people regardless of kind of what I went on to study and things. And then what led me into this work was working in my 20s. I went in as a behaviour support officer full-time in a secondary school. Had no idea what I was doing. I was given a caseload of 25 13 to 16-year-olds who were at risk of exclusion from school, but that's really where it all began. Those young people taught me so much about their lives, what they're experiencing. I then went into working in North London, again in education advocacy with children missing from school or excluded from school. And again, those young people taught me an awful lot, particularly about institutional racism. I would say I was really shocked by what I saw, what I experienced. And that gave me a real passion particularly for children and young people. And that's where my heart's always been. Then went into bullying prevention for a long time, but again, very much learning around what was going on for young people with their behaviours, what were driving those behaviours, what lay beneath. And when the opportunity came up to work from pregnancy to break cycles of abuse, I was like, yeah, that's where I want to be. It's trauma informed, it's right from the beginning, because I love working with teenagers, but it's tough. And so often you're thinking, if only we could have got on earlier and earlier and earlier and worked with the whole family, what a difference could have been made. And there's always hope for everybody. But that opportunity to get in pregnancy was like, wow, that's mind-blowing. I can't even believe someone's thought to do that work. And so it's been brilliant.
Love that. And we often talk about, and we're all from social work backgrounds, and that idea of early intervention. And it feels sometimes, we go in cycles, don't we, of people saying, oh, that would be a good idea. And actually it's as early as you get, isn't it? Kind of antenatally. So yeah, such an important space to be working in.
Yeah, I was wondering, this is a question that you're not expecting, so if you don't know the answer, it's fine. Yeah. But do you know the time frame of when professionals or organisations started to look at early intervention from pregnancy? Or do you have an idea about when did that start, or has it always been the case that?
Well, I can speak for Baby's Sake Trust. I mean, I suppose since times began, it depends on how you're kind of approaching it. People have been looking at pregnancy, but I suppose in early years and what that means. But I think probably in the last 10, 20 years is where people's understanding around actually what happens when you're in the womb has a profound impact on your long-term impacts. And that understanding of neuroscience is continuing to grow and develop all the time, isn't it? So for Baby's Sake Trust was very pioneering because it looked at the impact of domestic abuse not from any particular ideology or position. It was around what are we seeing in evidence, what do we think is coming up, and it was that combination of neuroscience, baby development, very high levels of domestic abuse beginning in pregnancy and combining kind of early, what we understood about early years development, the impact of domestic abuse, those things together for the first time. So we're still the only charity that's solely focused on the impact of DA in pregnancy and early years, which for me is astounding when we know that a third of domestic abuse begins in pregnancy. And so we shouldn't be the only charity in this space. And so a lot of our work's still around that understanding, but I do think that is really growing and developing. And also people working so much in education silos. So we've got early years development over here, domestic abuse over here. It's like, come on, folks, we've got to be bringing all of this together. What can we learn across different fields to really understand what it is that families need?
Yeah, I love that. And you're starting to kind of answer the second question that we have. So the For Baby's Sake charity is doing such great work to break the cycle of domestic abuse. Can you tell us a bit about the organisation's approach to supporting parents and babies, and what sets your work apart from other services out there?
Yeah, so like was saying, it was founded by a philanthropist who sold his business, but it was around about the time of the death of baby Peter Connolly, and he just felt really strongly, look, something's going really wrong here. Why do we keep getting the homicides of these young babies? What's going on around these families? And so it began with different researchers, academics, collaborators coming together to look at what was happening around the deaths of those babies and children. And what was coming up time and time again was intergenerational domestic abuse within those families, and the impact of that on babies and children, which at that time wasn't really understood. So it was that kind of very unique opportunity to go, let's approach something from a different way. And that led to the development of the For Baby's Sake programme, which is now 10 years old, celebrated our 10th year anniversary last year. And again, it was very unusual in that it saw the need to work with the whole family. And so we work separately and safely with both it's not always mum and dad, sometimes it's same-sex parents, but we work with co-parents where there's a pregnancy and domestic abuse, and they go on their separate therapeutic journey with us, but with the baby at the centre of that work. And we still are the only programme that takes that particular approach around pregnancy and early years, working up until the baby's second birthday, to break those cycles of domestic abuse and give that baby what it needs for the long term.
Wow. You've kind of spoken to a bit about like the importance of thinking about family systems and intergenerational patterns of domestic abuse. Why and talking about breaking those cycles as well. Why is it so important for people to understand the importance of looking at systems and kind of patterns in order to try and do something different for babies?
Yeah, it's about getting to the root causes of abuse and violence, and I think it's a really challenging space, and it's a space which brings up a lot of emotion for a lot of very important good reasons. But I think, sometimes within that, what we may miss is being able to hold a number of things at once. And so, your guest that you had on previously talked about how, for the young people, but also for many of us, we can be both perpetrators, victims and witnesses. We can be all of those things. And having that within our families, within our histories, impacts all of us. And so it's being able to take that approach around what's really happening around this family, what's been happening for generations within this family. So we've had parents who have said, this is the best start any baby has ever had in our family history. And because they have come very often, and our parents have taught me so much coming into the charity, their experiences, 70% of our parents have experienced 4 or more adverse childhood experiences. And we say it, don't we? I think as social, you just get so used to the ACEs and we're so casual about it. But what we're talking about they've grown up with domestic abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse. A lot of our parents have come from war zones. They've experienced racism within their community. They're holding all of this. And I think it's really sad that we're scared to acknowledge that we're so binary about domestic abuse. We're saying it's only caused by one thing. And it's really important to take a gendered approach. I'm not saying that. We absolutely need to look at the role of gender within this. But we're so complicated as human beings. There's so much going on for us. And so it's really important that we take the time to really listen and understand what happened to you and really get underneath that and then start to build. Yes, we need accountability, but we also need a space for transformation and for healing. Because without that, what we're left with, we're left with repeated cycles within families.
Just out of interest, I don't know if you're going to include this or not, but how do people come to know about For Baby's Sake? Are they referred? Are they sort of involved with the charity willingly? Are they sort of I was just wondering about the engagement. How's the referral process happen, or how do people? Or is there a referral process?
Really good question. So because we work in the space of domestic abuse and pregnancy, we work in a multi-agency context, and so the majority of families are referred to us by social workers or by safeguarding midwives. People do come to us independently in areas that we're working in, but we have to explain to those families that we do need to work with other agencies as well to make sure we're keeping that baby safe. But we're a consent-based programme, so both parents are consenting to come on board and come on that journey with us. We're not court mandated, and I think that's really important because people have to want to go on that journey of change and that journey of healing and transformation. So that's how the majority of parents come to us. But I think it raises an important question around shame and stigma around domestic abuse, that very often families are only in contact when it's reached crisis, when it's reached service point. And what we would like to see is much more. 1 in 5 children experience DA by the time they're 18. So this is massive. So we need to really support families to be able to come forward sooner to reach out and get that help that they need.
Sure. I was asking that from like my social work kind of lens of, this is the kind of work we try to do with families to increase their understanding of generational patterns and family systems and context, societal narratives and pressures and things. And I was just wondering how that fits with you as a charity, and whether so it was just really helpful to kind of hear that kind of process. So thank you.
Just on the curious, you're right in front of me, so I'm like, oh yeah, believe in everything you say, and it's just hitting home. Not hitting home, but more like educational in this space, and just thinking about the power of For Baby's Sake, and just going back to what you said before, that you're the only charity that really does this. Why do you think that is? Because if everything that you're saying is making sense to me with regards to early intervention and the patterns around DA and things like that, and I'm wondering why haven't other people tried to set up a charity that does similar work to what you all do?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's some of it's around the history of how we've approached domestic abuse, which has tended to be a very carceral approach, which is around crime and punishment. I mean, our violence against women and girls strategy is driven by the Home Office. A lot of the rhetoric that's come out even in recent months is around stamp it out, lock them up. It's very much perpetrator focused, take away the perpetrator, lock them away, and then you get rid of the problem. And so I think that has driven some of the approaches around this. And we know why. There's very strong feeling around that. And around the need for accountability with violence and with harm. But what I think is quite curious is that in other spaces, say, for example, when we're looking at youth violence, we're much more open to trauma and the impact of trauma and trauma histories around violence. But with domestic abuse, there's a lot of sensitivity around it. And I think what's been interesting for me with our work is that a really high proportion of our parents are 16 to 25-year-olds. So, we're still working with children who are having children as well. And it's about being able to really understand that and understand, I think sometimes people have a particular view when you talk about domestic abuse. They have a particular picture in their mind, don't they? When actually quite often we're talking about very young parents. A really high proportion of our parents are care experienced as well, up to, 25% in some areas, and have gone through that themselves. And so it's being able to sort of, support that need for, again, asking really brave, difficult questions within this space and being open to taking a different approach. But I think because it's very much been driven from a crime lens, it's made that quite challenging, I think.
Yeah. I was thinking when you were speaking about that, certainly was my experience when I was in social work practice. It was one of kind of sort of pathology of perpetrators and blame. And I know when I kind of worked with parents in the court system with substance misuse difficulties, and we would adopt that whole family approach, a lot of other agencies were kind of like, no, it was really hard to promote that because it was kind of holding that risk if parents were saying we want to be together. I think it's kind of that, isn't it, of how perpetrators are maybe historically viewed and then the kind of holding of that risk. So, yeah, I think that sort of matches some of my professional experience, but so important if we're going to kind of move forward and make that change. And when you were speaking, it's that very much that like compassionate, empathic and curious lens rather than that kind of blame, shame. If, perpetrators moved out, job done, and actually, you know, kind of quite short term thinking. So yeah, just love the whole ethos and values, and very much aligned to kind of my social work practice. So for Baby's Sake, you work with parents who may be kind of domestically abusive. I suppose what are some of the challenges in that work? And I suppose we're kind of touching on it a little bit. And then I guess off the back of that, what sort of approaches do you use in your work in working with parents who domestically abuse?
Yeah, I mean, I think, let's be honest, this is high risk work.
Yeah.
You know, we're working in pregnancy, we're working with domestic abuse, we're working with families in really vulnerable situations. And so we have to have very high level of safeguarding practice. And it's really important to say that we're not these, you know, these naive do-gooders who've kind of come in. This is tough. This is tough work. It's a tough space. And our workers, our therapeutic practitioners, they come from a variety of backgrounds. And so many have come from social work, from early years, from police, from probation, from housing, frontline services, wanting to be able to have that opportunity to work more long-term in a trauma-informed therapeutic way with families, that variety of backgrounds. But yeah, it's tough work, it's high-risk work. And that's why we work within multi-agencies and work very closely with social workers and with others to make sure that we're keeping that baby and that family safe. So for Baby's Sake, it takes therapeutic approaches within the work. It's a modular approach. We work up until the baby's second birthday, but it's a combination of things where we're looking at behaviours and we're looking at domestic abuse and we're looking at some of the root causes of that. We're looking at scripts, we look at gender, we look at masculinities, we look at all of that around, you know, what impact is that having. We work a lot around the baby at the centre, and we were chatting about this, weren't we, before we came on, using things like newborn baby observations, video interaction guidance with both mum and dad to help them really understand what's happening to baby in the womb, what's happening with baby's development, but understanding how they're impacting that baby's development right from the beginning. Baby hears their voice and hears tone of voice. There's some amazing research that's coming out around this. Levels of cortisol in mum affect baby. And so it's supporting both parents to really understand that. So work around the behaviour, work around the baby. And then the therapeutic core is inner child work with both parents, which is really going back and kind of understanding where some of those scripts have come from. And so, you know, like we said, it's tough work, it's consent-based work. It doesn't work for everybody. We have really low levels of attrition compared to other, you know, similar programs because we take that relational therapeutic approach for the long term. But it's hard work, and it's important to stress as well, half of our parents safely separate during their time with us as well. We're not couples therapy, we're not here to keep families together. Really important to stress. And sometimes that's about supporting people. We know that separation's a really dangerous time in domestic abuse, but when we're able to work separately with each parent, we're on that journey with them and we're spotting those signs and those signs of escalation and those signs of risk. We also know that those that use abusive behaviours have really high levels of suicide. And more research is coming out around that as well. And also those who are, you know, victim survivors of domestic abuse, we also know it has a profound impact on mental health. So that's also a really big part of our work. It's understanding that mental health for those parents as well and what's happening for them. And so it's very much holding all together, following, and being able to make sure that we're doing the right interventions and putting the right support in place and working with other partners as well and signposting. So it's complex, it's long term. But we do see that it does make a profound impact for a lot of these families in terms of significantly reducing levels of domestic abuse and seeing really good outcomes for that baby.
Given you've been going for quite some years now, do you have any kind of longitudinal qualitative kind of stories, I guess, of families who've gone through the kind of For Baby's Sake programme?
Yeah, good question. So that's something that we're looking at as a trust around how we can do more of a deep dive into the longitudinal data, because we've worked with now about 750 families over the years, and we work up until babies too. So within the programme itself, we follow the baby's milestones, going through measuring quite complicated outcome measurement as well, so measuring for parents and for baby. And there are ways you can measure for baby, but a bit more limited, and so we do want to get into that longitudinal work and be able to work with researchers around kind of following the families longer term to see what's happened for them and for their children.
Love that. This feels like a seminar. I might have joined it. It's lovely. It's really, really helpful. Just going on, we mentioned research, and research shows that the first 1,001 days of a baby's life is a crucial period. for their development. But how does the For Baby's Sake Trust incorporate this knowledge into its approach? And what difference do you believe early intervention can make in breaking the cycle of abuse?
Yeah, and I think, we touched on this, that right from the beginning of the programme, it was really understanding what was going on for families and for babies and children. And at that time, all those years ago, it was looking at emerging research that was coming out around the first 1001 days. And I think there's more and more evidence around that space now, around what happens to you in that period of time has a really profound impact on long-term outcomes. And even in the last couple of weeks, I met with a guy called Professor Dan Anderberg, who's an economist at Royal Holloway, who's been doing work into this and has been doing work particularly around intimate partner violence in the first 1001 days. And he's shared this study which shows that babies who are exposed in that period of time, the profound impact it has on social outcomes, but also cognitive outcomes. So what's happening to them in terms of education going forward. And so there's more and more things that are coming out all the time that what happens particularly around your brain development in that time and the impact that has going forward. And so that evidence base has always been at the centre of our work, and that's why it's so crucial, particularly when 30% of DA begins in pregnancy. And so you've got to get in at that point and be able to give families support they need then to really protect the long-term outcomes for that baby.
Thank you so much. And it sounds like you are doing absolutely phenomenal and incredible and kind of impactful work. I'd be unsurprised if the longitudinal studies come back and reflect that, once you've been able to gather the data. What I was wanting to ask you is, what are your hopes, I suppose, for the future of Baby's Sake, for the narratives in society around domestic abuse? How would you like those narratives to change maybe or shift, and how do you see For Baby's Sake being involved in that shift?
Yeah, I think I'd really like people to understand the impact of domestic abuse in pregnancy and early years. I still think there's not enough understanding around that. And then I think we need this embedded in our systems. So we need our social care teams to have training and support around those early years. We need, specialist interventions in pregnancy. That needs to be a priority time, not a kind of second thought. And because everything's interconnected, isn't it? We did a survey last year around the number of babies being referred into children's social care with DA as a factor, and what we could gather from the LAs that returned was about 50,000 babies every year and about at least 3,000 babies going into care with DA as a primary factor. And so it's being able to, we need all of our systems to really understand that, but not just to be waiting till, babies being taken away, and that families need that intervention right from the beginning to support them to be able to keep their baby and to be able to give their baby what it needs. And so we just need everyone to understand the impact in pregnancy and to invest in services then. I think we're firefighting all the time, aren't we? And we know that money is really tight out there. And so much it's about dealing with the impact of domestic abuse rather than getting in with the root causes, and we've got to do both. We've absolutely got to, but it's not either or, it's both. We've really got to do that if we're going to see long-term change.
Thank you so much. Honestly, that was so kind of interesting and just thought-provoking about the brilliant and important work that you do. If there were, I suppose both parents or professionals listening, how could they find out more? What areas do you work in? I know you sort of mentioned some training, so just to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, we feel really passionately about equipping and supporting frontline services. We're all in this together. It's so important to say. And so, check out For Baby's Sake Trust website. There's lots of free resources on there. We also run kind of bi-monthly free webinars where we bring on lots of different guests and have different focused conversations, which lots of social workers have signed up to and have joined. We do a lot across our social media channels as well to kind of share new stuff that's coming out, different ways people can get involved. The For Baby's Sake service itself at the moment is based in London, east of England, the northeast, and we've got a team in Blackpool. We want to be everywhere in time, but we have lots of contact from social workers, so just reach out to us. If we can't help, we can signpost to others, but like we say, we've got lots of free events and things that we're putting out all the time to sort of support people in their development.
Brilliant.
Do you also contribute to social work education at all through guest lecturing and stuff like that?
Yeah, we have been invited to do different guest lecturing in different universities and spaces as well, so always really open to that. Chief Social Worker Isabel Trowler came to visit our North East team last year, which was fantastic. So we are also advocating for social work training in DA to absolutely include the perinatal period and whole family trauma-informed work. I'm concerned that it won't. And so we believe that's super, super important. And so if that isn't driven by government, then we'll do it for ourselves in a different way and say, watch this space, because we need everybody to have that understanding and be able to support families in that space.
And I think that's so key, because I think when you were talking earlier about the need to really focus on that early intervention and focus on like accountability to domestic abuse, I think that holding those two in equal importance is so important when it comes to social work training.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Lauren. It's been an absolute pleasure and joy. We have been 3 social workers talking with Lauren, the CEO of For Baby's Sake. You can find us on LinkedIn, Social Matters, or Instagram at Matters Podcast. We'd love to hear your kind of thoughts, reflections on this brilliant and informative podcast, really thinking about early intervention and antenatal intervention in the space of domestic abuse. Thank you. Have a listen. Tune in.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.